Hello everyone, this is Direwolf20 and welcome to part 3 of Direwolf20's mod Spotlight covering Botania. Couple little things that I want to mention today before we get started in the proper mod spot. Vasky had a couple things that I missed last episode in part 2, so I want to mention them now. Let's get started. The first thing you guys should know about is with the Manus Monocle. Remember with the Manus Monocle, when you look at a flower, you can see its range? Well, if you shift right click with the Wand of the Forest, that gets saved. So you don't have to continue looking at the flower. So as long as you have the Manus Monocle on, if you shift right click on the flower, you can see what the range is at all times. Neat. The next correction is you cannot use the Rod of the Seas in a dispenser on the Petal Apothecary, but you can probably use it in some other right-clicking blocks, just not the vanilla dispenser. The Manus Monocle also has a pretty neat feature. It can allow you to see mana bursts behind blocks. Without the Manus Monocle, you wouldn't be able to see those. And the Manus Monocle also allows you to see the redstone state of any redstone. So just by looking at it, you can see its power level. Manus Monocle actually has a lot of neat little features I didn't know about. I mentioned you can have any number of mana pylons and mana pools here. You can have pretty much as many as you want in an 11 by 11 area, but the minimum is 2. And the final correction is the Terra Shadower doesn't use mana from your tablet while it's activated. It does use mana from the tablet to repair itself. However, it doesn't use mana from the tablet while activated. It simply uses some of its internally stored mana to remain activated. So keep that in mind. You're going to have to charge it up a little bit more every now and then. All right, let's get started with part 3. So there's obviously a ton of stuff to cover. One of the first nifty gadgets I want to show you here is the Rod of the Highlands. This is similar to the rod that creates dirt, however it can do it anywhere. It doesn't have to be placed on another block like the other rods that we've seen. This is a nice way to be able to place blocks of dirt pretty much anywhere, right? Up in the air or in a faraway place. You don't actually have to attach to an existing block. You can simply right click and it'll place the dirt wherever. Nice. The next item I want to introduce you guys to is the Rod of the Bifrost. The Bifrost, which is the magical rainbow bridge that reaches between the world we live in and the realm of the gods, is pretty similar to what this is based off of. So, simply right-click wherever you're looking and a nifty little bridge will form. Nice. This bridge can extend up to about 100 blocks and will also last for about 15 seconds. You'll also notice a cooldown existing on the hotbar there, and you can see when that 15 seconds is going to elapse. You cannot create a new bridge until the existing bridge expires. Now is as good a time as any to introduce to you guys the Living Wood Avatar. This is basically a block that you can place in the world, and he can use some rods for you automatically. There's a good handful of rods that he can use. Let's give it a try. So simply right-click to place him in the world. If he's not facing the direction you want, shift right-click with the Wand of the Forest. Cool. You can right-click him to hand him a neat Rod of the Bifrost. The next thing you want to do is supply him some mana. A mana spreader will do. Now, whenever we approach him, he should activate nice. Directly in front of me. Super cool. He takes care of making the Rod of the Bifrost bridge for me. Nice. Don't go too fast. Cool. Nice job, little dude. Thanks. If you just right-click with an empty hand, it'll remove the rod, and you can put other ones in there. So, for example, you could do Rod of the Skies. Cool. What this does, according to the book, is anytime you jump near him, you'll be shot up into the air. Nice. That is cool. So there's a bunch of different ones. Another neat rod is the Rod of the Plentiful Mantle. This, when you right-click it, will go ahead and show some glowing effects of ores nearby. And you can see that there's all different colors, and you'll have to kind of go explore and see which color represents which ore. But long story short, go find those colored blocks and you know where ore is. Handing this rod to the Living Wood Avatar makes that show up as well. Neat. There they are. And that'll remain on for a while, so you can go mining with the Living Wood Avatar nearby and hopefully find a bunch of ores. Let's see, there should be something down right about here. Yep, there it is, bauxite ore. Nice. Thanks, Living Wood Avatar. There's a bunch of other items we haven't covered yet in this current tier, but what I want to show you next is how to get to the next tier of items. Probably the first thing you're going to want to get when you get to this point is going to be the Gaia Manus Brother. This is a really powerful mana spreader, however, it requires a Gaia Spirit. Where do we get one of those? Well, we're going to have to do the Ritual of Gaia. So in order to make this thing, you're going to need some Gaia pylons, which requires those mana pylons we saw earlier, some elementium, and some pixie dust. So you definitely have to open the portal before you do that. Then you're going to need to place them around an active beacon. Let's set that up. Do note that these need to be 1 block space above the beacon. And of course, having visualize up absolutely helps. Structure complete. You're going to want to be well decked out in armor for this, either Terra Steel armor or Elementium armor, or make sure you have a Terra Blade, probably a lot of potions and stuff. We haven't taken a look at the potion system within Botania yet, but once you see that, you'll understand that there's a good way to get a lot of different potions from Botania. Enchanted stuff is good. Trust me, this is a tough fight. It's definitely harder than the Wither. To kick off the battle, you're going to need a Terra Steel ingot. And you're going to shift right click on the beacon with the Terra Steel ingot. Here goes nothing. Note over here. Basically what this is telling you is that you need to have a large area of clear land. Make sure that you've got it all filled out, and it's saying, hey, this is where you're having a problem. So if you shift right click and you can't activate the beacon, look for the obstructions. It's telling you exactly where your problem is, and make sure that land is filled up. Let's use the Rod of Terra Firma to do it. Simply hold right click and it'll raise or lower any nearby land and fill it up with dirt. Definitely an expensive rod, don't get me wrong, but definitely cool. So the Rod of Terra Firma requires a Terra Steel ingot and a couple other things, but that'll help raise your land level. Like I said, it'll also lower nearby land levels. So if you're standing here, for example, it'll lower everything in front of you or around you. It'll pretty much just flatten the terrain, up or down. Now let's try shift right clicking with the Terra Steel. Dun dun dun. Battle time. The Guardian of Gaia is a tough fight, don't get me wrong. I'm going to fight this guy off camera, but one thing you should note is that it sends pixies at you. Luckily, you've got a set of Elementium armor that sends pixies out as well. So as you're attacking, or being attacked by him, he's getting attacked by your pixies. Nice. Also having the sword, definitely helpful. Back in a minute. The purple stuff on the ground is definitely toxic. Try not to stand in it. And notice that you can't fly. It's definitely going to nullify your ability to fly. And that's bad news. So don't stand in the purple stuff, can't fly, all around, a pretty tough fight. Once the battle's over, you'll wind up with some Gaia Spirits. Gaia Spirits can be used to make a whole bunch of really cool and powerful items. We're going to check out some of them shortly here. Lots of neat stuff, honestly. And you can also use it to get yourself a Gaia Spirit Ingot. The Gaia Spirit Ingot is accessing for Tier 2 of the Ritual of Gaia. Pretty much the same thing as the first battle, except a lot harder. So if you thought the first battle was tough, make sure to prepare yourself before going into battle number 2. Simply make the Gaia Spirit Ingot and shift right click on the beacon to summon the stronger version of the Gaia Guardian. This is going to give you even more Gaia Spirits when you kill her, and you'll also get access to some really powerful items, which we'll check out shortly. By the way, just so you guys know, Kane Vinosek is the person who did the music from the Gaia Guardian that we just heard. I think there's 1 or 2 of them in there, and you can also get yourself some records with that music if you want. The Gaia Guardian has a limit to how much damage it can take from one shot. So if you get like some super powerful, crazy attack item from a mod, it's not going to one-shot the Gaia Guardian. So Vasky's done a lot to make the Gaia Guardian a hard, difficult battle that's not easy to like automate and get lots of Gaia Spirits. Like, you really have to fight the thing. And you can also fight it in multiplayer. If there are more than one player around when you activate the ritual, it will increase the health of the mob and maybe even increase some of the attack abilities of it, but you'll also get more rewards from it. So that's pretty cool. So there's a lot of stuff that's really cool to make with these Gaia Spirits. One of them is an upgraded sash. So if you like the speed of the Sojourner stash, go ahead and get yourself the Globetrotter sash and you'll move even faster. Nice. Another cool one is the Shard of Laputa. This is pretty cool. It'll basically make an island for you. It raises the terrain around you and lifts it up into the air in a spherical area. It consumes the shard, and it takes a while, upwards of 10 minutes to move the land. The radius of the island starts at 14, so 28 blocks in diameter, but you can increase it, and it adds 1 block to the radius or 2 to the diameter. And you can upgrade it multiple times with the Gaia Spirit. So you can see that there's, you know, a large number of shard upgrades. Like a large number. It can go all the way up to 20. So 20, 19, 18, 17, 15, right, all the way down. Pretty cool. Let's give it a try over here and see how it goes. I'm just going to use the tier 1 shard, just so you can see what the basic one looks like. And I think all we have to do is, let's not do it on gravel, because that probably won't work too well. Let's do this forest biome. That should be neat. Dun 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 dun. And everything's moving. Nice. It does indicate that this will take a few minutes, and it definitely does. But you can see that it's pretty much raising the terrain for you and creating a neat little island. Obviously, using a larger shard creates a larger area of effect. Neat. As mentioned briefly earlier, there are upgraded versions of the Gaia Spreader, the Elven Mana Spreader. These are upgraded versions of the regular Mana Spreader. The Elven one is basically made out of Dreamwood, so once you get open access to the portal there, you can make this one. It can definitely move things faster and move larger amounts of mana. And then adding a Gaia Spirit to it makes it even more crazy powerful. So pretty much the fastest and best Mana Spreader around. So if you find yourself generating lots of mana or using lots of mana and you want to speed that up, you can definitely do it with the top tier Gaia Mana Spreader or the Elven Mana Spreader. There's also the Pulse Mana Spreader, which is pretty neat. You just place it on the ground and give it a redstone signal, so either a button or a lever, whatever you want to do, and every time it receives a redstone pulse, it'll fire a mana burst. This is useful for a lot of different things. One of the last crafting ingredients you're going to want to know about is the Ender Air Bottle. It's actually really easy. Just get yourself an empty bottle and go to the end, and then right click. That's all there is to it. Nice. The Ender Air Bottle can be thrown to turn stone into endstone, and it also has a lot of crafting properties that we'll see pretty soon. Now that we've opened up the Gaia portal and killed the Gaia Guardian and done a bunch of things, we have access to a few more generating flowers. Let's take a look at a handful of the other ways to generate mana using Botania. With the Mana Seer Monocle, we can see the area of effect of the Thermalily. It's quite small. It works very much like the water absorption flowers in that it'll pick up any lava source blocks in its immediate vicinity. Boom. And then it'll start producing mana. At a pretty decent rate. It runs for about 45 seconds and will produce large amounts of mana. Like, really large. You're probably going to want to have not just a regular Mana Spreader doing this. Okay? The Thermalily is going to produce a whole bunch of mana. The downside of the Thermalily is that after that 45-second duration of mana production, which, you know, it creates a ton from that lava, it has a 5-minute cooldown. Okay, so before it can absorb and produce mana from lava again, it needs to wait 5 full minutes. So basically, the Thermalily is meant to be like a huge infusion of mana. Once you've gone ahead and made the Thermalily, it's not too bad to make. You can make it pretty early game. It produces a ton of mana, but at a short duration, right? And it's not easily automatable. Basically, what you need to do is go ahead and, you know, figure out a way to set that timer. So it just finished running, it looks like. Yep. And you can see it's got these little steaming particle effects. Now, here's the downside. It's even worse for automation purposes. If you throw another bucket of lava down, it might absorb it. And it'll say right here, during the cooldown period of the flower to absorb any lava, it instead consumes it, generating no mana, and then it restarts the 5-minute timer. So don't throw down another bucket of lava immediately. Kind of have to wait. But it produces a whole bunch of mana. So long story short, it's meant to be a quick infusion of mana, and if you can come up with a cool way to automate it, it might not be bad. The Roza Arkana, if you look at my experience bar, is pretty obvious. It drains experience, and it creates mana from the experience of nearby players. Cool. So lots of mana being created there. So if I do XP 30L, gives me 30 levels of experience. It'll simply drain my experience and feed it into the spreader. Again, it does it at a pretty high rate, so you're probably going to want to have a better mana spreader than the default one. And you can see it there. It kind of stops draining experience while the Roza Arkana is full. Nice. the Kekamuris, one of my favorites. It actually creates a decent amount of mana, pretty much out of cake. So all you need to do is get yourself some cake and place it in the world nearby, inside the area of effect. The Kekamuris will find that cake and start eating it, producing a decent chunk of mana. Nice. It's pretty easy to automate, as you can probably guess. Just throw cake down and it'll sit there and eat it all day long and produce large amounts of mana. Not a ton, obviously, per cake, but fair enough, it's pretty good. The Narcilimas is a really hard flower to demonstrate. Basically what it does is it has to be placed inside a slime chunk. And whenever a slime would naturally spawn inside the slime chunk, it destroys that slime and collects the mana from what would have been created. The larger the slime that would have been spawned, the more mana is created. Long story short, you can't use this with like a slime spawner. It has to use natural vanilla Minecraft spawning mechanics. So there's really no good way to spawn this automatically. So basically, if you find a slime chunk nearby and there's a lot of slime spawning down there, go ahead and throw the Narcilimas downstairs and you'll get a decent amount of mana from it. The Spectralus is a pretty cool flower. It's rainbow colored because it has to do with wool. Basically, you throw wool down on it and it has to absorb wool in the proper order. Starting with white, it absorbs one piece of wool and then rotates to the next color in the spectrum. And you can see what wool colors there are by just looking it up in JEI. Cool. So you throw down some white and it'll eat it and it'll consume and produce mana. And then you throw down orange and it'll eat it and throw down and make mana. If you throw blue next, it ate it but didn't produce any mana. Same for yellow. That's not good. Magenta's the next one. Now you can throw blue. And then yellow. If you were to throw pink next, no mana. Lime's the next one in the order, right? So you have to find a way to automate this and make sure you throw down the proper wool colors in the proper order. If you do it in the right order, you're good. If you do it in the wrong order, you wind up wasting wool. The next flower to check out is the Lotusia. This flower is pretty cool. It basically works like the Kekamuris, but instead of eating cake, it'll make any man-made flowers that you made in the Petal Apothecary and eat them. So let's take a look at some Botania flowers. So for example, if we took a look at some of the ones that we made earlier. If we place down an Endoflame, for example, boom, it'll consume and destroy that Endoflame and turn it into mana. Nice. Same for Hydrangeas. Boom, consumes it, destroys it, etc. Has a decent area of effect, so watch out where you place it. And the thing to note on this is that there's diminishing returns if you do the same flower over and over. So it indicates here you should kind of, do multiple flowers or different ones. So if you automated creating flowers and then dropped or placed those flowers on the ground, you could create a decent amount of mana in a relatively easy manner. All you really need is some of the petals and whatever else you want to make. So not a bad idea. There's Black Lotus that you can find in dungeon chests. All you do is drop it into a mana pool, and it'll automatically create mana. That flower is not craftable, mind you, so there's no way to get it, but if you do find it in dungeon chests, that's how you use it. Finally, there's a really crazy flower called the Dandelion. The Dandelion is a nifty flower. It can generate large amounts of mana, however, it requires large amounts of automation as well. It follows Conway's Game of Life, and it's pretty much you have a 25 by 25 square area centered around the Dandelion. So if we were to take a look at that, pretty large area. And in there, it can perform actions on some blocks. First, you're going to need to get some cellular blocks, which are crafted like so. You place them in the world somewhere within this 25 by 25 block radius. When you apply a redstone signal to the flower, it will function and activate the Game of Life. Twice every second, or in other words, every half a second, it will create one step in the game. Every step of the game, the following transitions might happen. Any live cell with fewer than 2 or more than 3 live neighbors dies. For example, this cell has fewer than 2 neighbors. It only has 1. A neighbor is represented by the 8 blocks around a cell. Like so. So if there are less than 2 living cells around an existing living cell, it will die off. If there are more than 3, it will also die. Any live cell with exactly 2 or 3 live neighbors lives on, and any dead cell with exactly 3 live neighbors becomes a live cell. What that means is if you have an empty space, so for example, this block space here has 3 neighbors, so that will turn into a live cell. So this cell should live on because it has 2 or 3 neighbors. This cell will die. This cell will live on because it has 1, 2 neighbors. This cell has 3 or 4 actually neighbors, so actually it probably won't create one, but now it will. And we'll see what happens. So placing down the redstone signal, you'll notice that this cell, which had 1, 2 neighbors, lived on. This cell that had 1, 2, 3 neighbors lived on, and or became this cell. It's a little complicated, but trust me when I tell you, play with it a little bit and you'll get the hang of it. What happens is these things can morph, and if you've watched my Forgecraft series, you saw a much more in-depth demonstration of how to build an automated system to handle this. Basically, every time the half a second occurs, it'll move the game 1 step forward. All cells have an age starting at 0. Whenever a cell lives on by having 2 or 3 neighbors, its age increases by 1. Whenever a dead cell becomes a live cell, the age of the new live cell is equal to the age of the oldest neighbor plus 1. So in other words, these cells know how long they've been living for. And then what happens is the 3x3 zone surrounding the Dandelion will consume any live cells that land in it and turn them directly into mana. And you'll be able to produce a whole bunch of mana. Finally, any cells older than 100 generations will produce mana as if they were age 100. Cool. I like it. It should note that as soon as the Dandelion absorbs any live cells in its area of effect, that 3x3 zone, all other cells on the board immediately die. So your challenge is to construct a nifty way to automate this system. I just created a very basic one that produced a little bit of mana. You'll see a small amount sitting in there. Nice. Make sure to turn the redstone signal off when you're ready to build again, and try out a bunch of different combinations. The goal really is to get as many cells into this center area as you can, and once they get there, they'll automatically be eaten and turned into mana. Cool. The Dandelion itself can hold a large amount of mana, and overall, it's a fun little way to create mana, and it's definitely neat. Highly recommend you checking it out, and if you're looking online, you can find some recommendations on some really efficient ways to do it, but in my opinion, you should kind of figure out your own ways. As you start playing with mana more and more, you're going to try and figure out, am I gaining mana currently or losing it? Especially if you have mana going out and mana coming in at the same time. For this, you're going to want to get yourself one of these nifty guys, the Mana Star. Placing it next to your mana pool will have it shine red if there's a loss, or blue if there's a profit. Basically, for example, if we have the Kekimuris, and we got ourselves some cake, we should have this guy start to shine blue. There it is. Blue particle effects occurring because there's a net gain currently in the pool. Nice. That's pretty cool. Now, if we were losing mana, which we're not going to be able to do too easily with that mana spreader, but maybe if we hooked up the Runic Altar, we could see a good way to lose mana. So once we're no longer gaining mana, you'll see those blue particle effects kind of stop occurring. And then if we dropped some items over here, we would see red particle effects start to appear. So this is a good way to figure out if you're currently having a net gain or a net loss. So if we were feeding this at the same time we were losing it, we could tell whether we were having a net gain or loss. Neat. The next block to take a look at is the Mana Void. I've never used this block, and I don't understand the purpose of it, but maybe you will. Basically, it completely destroys mana. Any mana shot into the Mana Void will be destroyed. So basically, again, if we had the Kekimuris placed down and some cake, the Mana Void can accept mana from the spreader, and it will automatically just void out any mana. So we can see here, all the mana is being voided directly into the Mana Void. And it's just going away, gone forever. Now, if mana is going into a mana pool, you can place the Mana Void underneath the mana pool. The mana pool can now always accept mana. If it were full, it would not accept it, and the Mana Burst would not fire. Now, it will accept it and just void any excess after the mana pool has filled up. There's also the Mana Distributor. This block will evenly distribute mana to any adjacent mana pools that you have touching it. So, if you wanted to, you could do something like this. Get yourself a bunch of mana pools and put them on the 3 sides of the block. Now, when it starts sending mana into the Mana Distributor, it'll automatically evenly distribute the mana to the adjacent pools. This is a nice way to increase your storage supply of mana. Obviously, you can also use the Spark Augment system that we saw last episode. Another option that you can use is the Spreader Turntable. Basically, it turns spreaders around, and it can rotate around. Pretty neat. Given that a redstone signal isn't applied. If you apply a redstone signal, it'll stop. To change the speed of the turntable, right-click with a Wand of the Forest. Shift right-clicking will invert the movement. So shift right-click to have it go the other direction, and right-click to change the speed. Nice. Pretty cool, right? This way, the Spreader Turntable can kind of spin around and distribute its mana to different mana pools. So, for example, if you had a mana pool here, and you had another one over here, and we had some cake down, and we were getting a bunch of mana, the mana spreader would start to fill up, and then once it spins around and has a destination that it can hit, it'll shoot into there. Then it no longer has a destination. It can shoot over to here, can shoot over to here, can shoot over to here, can shoot over to this one, and that's pretty neat. And like I said, you can rotate it if you want, reverse the direction or increase it. Different ways to distribute mana, and obviously if you want it to run faster, you can have that happen. Cool. Finally, there's the Overgrowth Seed. The Overgrowth Seed is actually pretty hard to find, so when you do find one, consider yourself lucky. It can't be crafted, it can only be found in dungeon chests, pretty much. You basically right-click it on the ground to create enchanted soil. Any flowers that are rooted on the soil can function at double the normal speed. So, we'll just place this on here, and suddenly you've got enchanted soil. Now this flower can function at double the normal speed. In other words, it'll eat cake twice as fast. Definitely a noticeable increase in speed. This is really useful for a lot of different flowers, as you can imagine. But like you can also imagine, they're rare and hard to find. If you try to pick it up with Silk Touch, it won't work. Dun dun dun. So do be careful. And choose wisely when you place it. Those of you who like your Minecraft skin and don't want it completely covered up by Mr. Armor, you can go ahead and make yourself some Phantom Ink. Neat. Simply apply your Phantom Ink to your armor, and it will change it so that the armor doesn't render on your player. Cool. Phantom Ink is not too hard to make, and it also has a couple other purposes as well. Let's take a look. Note, by the way, that it only works on any armor from Botania, or pretty much armor that uses mana. Crafting a mana pool with a minecart gives you a minecart with a mana pool on it. Nice! If you want to get mana into this, the only way to do that is with a mana pump. Let's check it out. If we take a look in the Lexic Botania entry, it says right here in the book that basically the side where the mana will go is the blue one, or it's pulled from the blue side and it will go to the pink side. So right now this mana pump is set to extract from the cart. Shift right click to turn it around, and you can see that it can pump mana pretty quickly from the mana pool here into the cart. Nice, that's really cool. If you want to rotate it back, no problemo. Super awesome, right? Very cool. A comparator on the mana pump will tell you how much mana is currently inside the minecart in the pool in the minecart, and you can apply a redstone signal if you want to stop it. So notice here that our number is going down as we pump mana out of the pool. This pool filled up because we have the spark set up, but you can see the redstone signal going down. Neat. And now the redstone signal going up. And like I said, if you apply a redstone signal to the pump, it'll prevent it from running. There you go. No more running. And with that, guys, I think we've had reached a pretty good wrapping up point for part 3 of the Botania mod Spotlight. There's a lot more to cover. There's a lot of functional flora that we haven't looked at yet, and I'd like to show you guys what all the functional flora is and what it can do. We've seen a few of these, but as you can see, there's a lot. And even more now that we've unlocked the portal to Elfheim. We also haven't talked about lenses, so there's a bunch of mana lenses and elven mana lenses. And we haven't talked about some of the other gadgets and toys. There's a ton of items and baubles that we haven't seen yet, like a large amount. And then there's some automation systems that we haven't taken a look at yet either. Then there's ender mechanics, and then there's relics, some crazy items that you can get from fighting the Gaia Guardian Mark II. So I think we have at least 2, if not 3 more episodes of these mod spotlights going on. So for now, Daryl20 signing off. Hope you guys enjoyed part 3 of the Botania mod spotlight. A lot more items to cover and a lot more things to talk about. All right, guys, for now, take it easy.